This video is about Bitcoin's IPO moment and why the negative price action we've seen recently might actually be a bullish sign. So Bitcoin is down again. October was dead on arrival, and it's been a brutal start to Moonvember. Many people thought we would never see 100K Bitcoin again, but we did briefly break below the 100K line the other day. So I hope you had your limit orders set as low as 99,000 because this was definitely an opportunity to buy the dip. But I digress because crypto Twitter is in absolute shambles, and a lot of Bitcoiners, to be fair, are also frustrated, confused, and maybe even feeling a little bit panicked. The sentiment generally is, how is this thing not breaking out? ETFs are buying, treasury companies are buying, all the news seems bullish. Why the heck is Bitcoin's price going down? But what if all this boring, flat, or negative price action isn't actually bad news? What if this doesn't represent weakness and it's actually the opposite? Because maybe if you really look closely and you know where to look, you might see that everything happening right now is actually a sign of strength. And I'm going to explain why in just a second. Real quick, my name is John from My Favorite Thing About Bitcoin. I'm going to rebrand the channel soon, so stay tuned for that. But I studied traditional economics for years, and then I studied Bitcoin for several years, and I made my choice. Then I created this channel with the goal of helping other people better understand and grow their conviction in Bitcoin. So hit the subscribe button. Now, part of the inspiration for this video is there's a 30-year TradFi Wall Street guy named Jordy Visser, who recently had a piece that he wrote go viral called Bitcoin's Silent IPO. And he touched on something I've been thinking about making a video about for a while, and I think his thesis really helps to explain almost all the frustration we've seen recently from people wondering why Bitcoin hasn't shot past 200K yet. What if this right now, the last several months, 2025 altogether, is Bitcoin's IPO moment? So let me explain what that means. I'm not saying Bitcoin is a company or that it sells shares. I'm saying the evidence shows that 2025 has been a massive redistribution event in Bitcoin. If you're just looking at Twitter or news headlines, all you see is bullish news about corporate adoption, ETF inflows, regulatory clarity, et cetera, et cetera. Retail, institutions, ETFs, treasuries, family offices, nation states, all buying Bitcoin and sending the signals that Bitcoin is now a rubber-stamped, certified, approved institutional asset. Sometimes they're buying it quietly, sometimes they're buying it loudly, but the buying has seemed to be relentless. But what you don't ever see in the headlines is that in recent months, there is literally an estimated $30 to $35 billion per month in sell-side pressure on Bitcoin. On-chain analysts earlier this year were sometimes reporting $2.5 to $3 billion a day in sell pressure. Over 5.5 million of the roughly 19.9 million Bitcoin that are currently in circulation, that have already been mined, have changed hands at least once at prices above 100K Bitcoin. Are you following that? 5.5 million Bitcoin have changed hands in less than the last 12 months alone. Old holders who got in early, who've been around long term, who for years were price insensitive, are finally offloading. 100K truly appears to be the marker that a lot of long-term hodlers decided was their time to let go of some Bitcoin. Maybe they're diversifying, maybe they're retiring, maybe they're estate planning, maybe they're buying yachts and Lambos, who knows? But there has just been an absolute ton of selling the last several months. But here's the thing. A whole new wave of entrants has stepped in to absorb it. Bitcoin is holding the line. It's not crashing. It's not capitulating. It's just consolidating. That's not bearish. If anything, that's what happens right before the real move actually begins. So that's why 2025 might go down as Bitcoin's IPO moment. Don't get hung up on the analogy. Again, I'm not saying Bitcoin is a company or it has certain legal classifications or that it just went public. But what I'm saying is that what's happening beneath the surface is reminiscent of what historically happens with large tech IPOs. In classic large tech IPOs, you get the same pattern. You get a small group of early insiders who hold most of the supply. Then comes the public listing, and then that insider supply starts getting distributed to the public. And after that happens, is when most of the actual value creation happens. If you look at Facebook, the market cap at the time of IPO was around 100 billion. Today, it's over 1.5 trillion. Amazon market cap was like 560 million at the IPO. Now it's 2.7 trillion. I could name many more examples. Yes, there are tremendous percentage gains for the earliest insiders. But the absolute dollar gains in share price and the market cap mostly come after the IPO, not before. What's happening with Bitcoin right now rhymes with that pattern. Since June of this year, over 2 million Bitcoin have been sold by long-term hodlers. That's more than 10% of the total current circulating supply. Old coins are moving. Dormant supply is waking up. You have huge realized profits, billions and billions being locked in, and still the Bitcoin price has held above the 100K range. Again, that's not bearish. That's just a redistribution. It's a healthy rotation. It's the expansion of the float from a smaller base of OGs and early adopters to a broader, deeper, more publicly distributed ownership. $30 to $35 billion per month in sell-side pressure, a large percentage of that long-term profit taking being fully absorbed. To put that in perspective, that's more daily selling than most other ETFs even take in monthly. So you have long-term holders, so call them the equivalent of early VCs or insiders if you're doing the tech company analogy, selling the equivalent of thousands of Bitcoin every day for weeks on end. And yet, Bitcoin is not collapsing. Like I said, that 5.5 million Bitcoin that have changed hands at least once at prices above 100K, that's roughly 28% of the total supply being repriced at new levels. We're not talking about just a few whales diversifying or rebalancing. It's wide-scale turnover. On-chain realized profits from long-term holders have jumped to 754 billion in just a few months. Hundreds of billions in gains realized with an average sale price around 110K. For some early holders, that implies tens of thousands of dollars per coin in profits. ETF inflows only account for about 20% of total sell-side absorption, which means the rest is just retail, hedge funds, family offices, foreign buyers, corporate treasuries, all quietly stacking sats. What you're seeing is akin to the Bitcoin equivalent of early insiders cashing out into a public listing and the market actually being strong enough to absorb it. That's a bullish signal, and it's probably not over. And crucially, historically, for large tech companies, the ones with massive digital monopolies and tremendous network effects, like Bitcoin, most absolute market cap growth happens after the IPO. Yes, the early insiders might have gotten the highest percentage returns, but the majority of total dollar value tends to accrue once that thing hits the public market. That's when the base of buyers can grow by 10x, the liquidity deepens, and more capital floods in. And that's where Bitcoin is right now, on the cusp of that shift. Neither a blow off top nor a failed breakout, just a redistribution. The storm before the scale. And if this is true, if this really is Bitcoin's IPO phase, then that means we are still early, like shockingly early. Because don't forget, if you zoom out, we are still under global penetration levels of 5%. The maturation of the asset is just beginning. Volatility is starting to drop. The drawdowns are becoming shallower. Previous cycles routinely saw drawdowns of 30 or 50%, multiple of them in a single cycle. This cycle has not seen any drawdown at 30%, and this one, we're still close to about 20% off of the all-time high we saw earlier this year. So we have not had a dramatic bear market or a devastating drawdown, as long as you're not using leverage and as long as you're not trading crypto. Remember that. This, in Bitcoin, is just classic post-IPO behavior. More capital moving in, more conviction, and less panic. I do get people in the comments telling me that the easy gains are gone, Bitcoin can't do 100x anymore. If you're a high time preference fiat maxi, that might be true. Maybe in percentage terms, the gains you can do in a single trade or a single day are not going to match some shitcoin with a $10 million market cap. But in absolute dollar value and in total market cap terms, the next phase of compounding only gets unlocked once the ownership base expands, which is what's happening now. So if you missed 2013, if you missed 2017, if you missed 2020, this is your window. Just like insiders offload equity into public markets, Bitcoin's early holders are offloading Bitcoin into a newly accessible global market. We got the first cycle with live spot ETFs, GAAP-compliant accounting for Bitcoin treasuries, far greater regulatory clarity, and the real first time institutional access is frictionless and real time. In past cycles, there wasn't a mechanism for large-scale regulated capital to flow in, and now there is, which potentially explains why we haven't had a blow off top with a bunch of euphoria. We've been grinding sideways and even down while huge amounts of supply are changing hands. If 124K were the top, we'd likely have seen classic blow-off behavior, parabolic move, shallow liquidity, retail mania. But that isn't what happened. This is just a slow, heavy, deliberate distribution over the course of 6 to 9 months. Exactly what you'd expect before the next leg begins. So yeah, I know Bitcoin's down this week, this month, and basically flat across the last 6 months. We're back to hovering near 100K, and some people are nervous. But if you take a step back, you remember that 100K Bitcoin was still a pipe dream even just 12 months ago. And the recent drawdowns don't look like a structural breakdown. When you look under the surface, all you see is historic redistribution from old hodlers to new, from early believers to broad adoption, and from concentrated supply to diversified global ownership. If 2025 really is Bitcoin's IPO moment, then what comes next isn't a crash, it's the Launchpad. The author of the Bitcoin IPO piece, Jordy Visser, says the consolidation could take 6 to 18 months. We could already be 6 to 9 months into it. And since crypto moves faster than traditional markets, the timeline could be accelerated. So I don't know what happens next week or in the next couple months, but I do know that when you look back a few years from now, this range we're stuck in won't look like resistance. It will look like a blip. As Michael Sullivan said in this tweet, someday soon, the circle on the right is going to look like the circle on the left. All you got to do is buy Bitcoin and wait. And speaking of Michael Sullivan, I just did an interview with him about orange pilling the world through Bitcoin fiction. So sub to the channel and stick around to get that as soon as it drops in the next week or two. But finally, here is the deal. Quit being focused on the price and instead watch the structure. What's actually happening underneath? Because that's what matters. And right now, I'd argue that what's happening underneath is bullish as hell. So if you made it this far, leave a comment what you think about the Bitcoin IPO thesis. Hope you didn't get shaken out this past week at 99K Bitcoin. Let me know if you bought the dip. And as always, you never forget, Bitcoin is inevitable.